There is a specific kind of silence that hits your ears when you realize the life you've spent. A decade building has just been sold behind your back. It doesn't sound like crashing glass. It doesn't sound like screaming. It sounds like the tearing of a single premium-grade bank envelope on a random Tuesday evening in October. Inside that envelope wasn't a standard monthly statement. It was a notice of default, a final warning. The bank was threatening to foreclose on a house that I had paid off, in cash, 4 years before I even met my wife. If you've ever had to build your life from the ground up, working until your hands bled, only to have someone you love try to steal it out from under you, this story is for you. Before we get into how I let the FBI crash her brother's launch party, do me a favor, hit the like button to feed the algorithm so others can hear this. And please, hit subscribe. We are on the road to hitting our first 100 subscribers on this channel, and every single one of you clicking that button is the difference between this community growing or dying. Help me get to 100. Now, let me tell you how my wife tried to sell my life to fund her brother's delusions, and exactly how I made them both pay. I'm 36 years old. I own a mid-sized commercial HVAC maintenance company just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. If you know anything about the desert, you know that air conditioning isn't a luxury out here. It's a matter of absolute survival. I started pulling wrenches when I was 19, riding shotgun in a beat-up Chevy Express van that didn't even have working AC itself. I spent my 20s crawling through 140-degree attics, replacing blower motors and breathing in fiberglass insulation. While guys my age were taking out loans for college degrees they'd never use, or financing trucks they couldn't afford, I was banking every single dollar I made. I ate rice and beans. I wore boots until the soles literally separated. By the time I was 28, I bought my own truck. By 30, I had 3 crews working under me. And at 31, I bought a 4-bedroom ranch-style house in Chandler, Arizona for $15,000. Cash. No mortgage, no bank owning my soul. The deed was in my name, locked in a fireproof safe in my home office. It was my fortress. I met Mia a year later. She was 30 at the time, working as a social media manager for a boutique real estate firm in Scottsdale. She was beautiful, sharp, and possessed this magnetic energy that I, a guy who spent most of his life talking to ductwork and contractors, found intoxicating. She loved the stability I offered. I loved the color she brought into my very gray, structured life. We got married 2 years later. I paid for the wedding, a beautiful outdoor ceremony in Sedona, in cash. We had no debt. We had a 6-figure emergency fund. We had it made. But there was a catch, and that catch was named Kyle. Kyle was Mia's younger brother, 28 years old and the undisputed golden child of my mother-in-law, Susan. Kyle had never held a real job for more than 6 months. He was, in his own words, an entrepreneur and a visionary. In reality, he was a guy who watched too many hustle culture podcasts, wore a fake Rolex, and leased a brand new Porsche Macan that his mother quietly helped him make the payments on. For the first 3 years of my marriage, Kyle's ventures were mostly harmless annoyances. A drop shipping store that failed, a premium energy drink brand that never made it out of the garage. But then, crypto happened. Kyle suddenly rebranded himself as a decentralized finance guru. He started wearing black turtlenecks and talking about blockchain integration. And to make his vision a reality, he needed seed money, a lot of it. The pitch happened at our dining room table on a Sunday in August. Kyle, flanked by Mia and my mother-in-law, rolled out a glossy presentation for a startup LLC he called Next Trade. He wanted $150,000. I looked at him, looked at the iPad he slid across the table and said, no. I didn't say, let me think about it. I didn't say maybe. I said no. I explained that I work in reality. I fix machines that cool buildings. I don't invest in invisible coins backed by nothing, run by a guy who couldn't keep a lemonade stand in the black. Susan gasped like I had slapped him. Kyle looked down at his shoes, playing the victim perfectly. When they left, Mia exploded. It was the worst fight of our marriage. She accused me of not believing in her family, of hoarding my wealth, of being small-minded. "It's a loan, James," she screamed. "He'd pay us back with 20% interest in 6 months. We have the equity in the house." "There is no we on the deed, Mia," I told her quietly. "And I will never put a lien on the house I broke my back to pay for. Not for him." The answer is final. She didn't speak to me for a week, but eventually things cooled down. She apologized. She told me she respected my boundaries and that she had told Kyle to look for angel investors instead. She started being overly sweet. She brought me coffee in the mornings. She planned weekend getaways. For 2 months, I thought I had weathered the storm. I thought I had set a boundary that saved my marriage. I was an idiot, which brings us back to that Tuesday in October and the premium-grade bank envelope in my hands. I had come home early because a compressor job got rained out. Mia was at her yoga class. The mail was sitting on the kitchen island. She usually got to the mail before I did these days, a detail I hadn't thought twice about until right now. I tore open the envelope. The header read, First Desert Financial, Home Equity Line of Credit. Notice of overdue payment. My blood turned to ice water. I read the numbers. Loan origination date, September 4th. Principal amount, $180,000. Secured asset, my home address. My hands started to shake, not with fear, with a white-hot, blinding rage. I went into my office, booted up my computer, and called the fraud department at the bank. I demanded the origination documents. The rep, sensing the panic in my voice, emailed me the digital file right away. I sat in the glow of my monitors and stared at the PDF. There it was, my signature, e-signed via a third-party online notary service. A service that, as I quickly discovered, allowed for remote notarization if the spouse was presenting on the primary owner's behalf with a scanned ID. Mia had taken my passport from the safe. She had forged my digital signature. She had leveraged my fully paid-off home for a massive high-interest loan. And the final page of the document showed exactly where the $180,000 had been wired immediately upon approval. Recipient, Next Trade, LLC. Managing Director, Kyle Peterson. I didn't yell. I didn't smash the monitors. I sat back in my leather chair, listening to the hum of the air conditioner I had installed myself. A man can lose his temper over a dented truck or a bad day at work, but when someone tries to steal your home, the very foundation of your life, you don't get angry, you get clinical. Mia would be home in exactly 45 minutes, and by the time her key turned in the lock, the James she thought she knew would be dead, replaced by a ghost who was going to systematically dismantle her entire existence. When Mia's key finally turned in the front door, I was sitting on the couch watching a baseball game. The digital folder containing the evidence of her federal crime was safely backed up to 3 separate cloud drives she didn't know existed. The physical bank notice was locked in my fireproof safe. "Hey, babe," she called out, dropping her gym bag in the hallway. Traffic was a nightmare. "You hungry?" I looked at the woman I had married, the woman who, just 6 weeks ago, had casually forged my identity to put a $180,000 bounty on the roof over my head. "Starving," I said, offering a tired smile. "Let's order a pizza." That was the hardest slice of pizza I've ever swallowed, but survival makes you a fantastic actor. For the next 3 weeks, I didn't just play the role of the good husband. I played the perfect one. I bought her flowers. I asked how her brother's startup was coming along. I listened to her lie straight to my face with a smile that never reached her eyes. The very next morning, while Mia was at her office, I drove into downtown Phoenix. I didn't go to my regular business attorney. I went to a guy named Robert Vance. Robert was a former federal prosecutor who now handled high-asset, high-conflict divorces. He was expensive, cold, and exactly what I needed. I laid the HELOC paperwork and the LLC transfer records on his mahogany desk. Robert studied them in silence for 2 full minutes. When he finally looked up, he didn't offer sympathy. He offered a battle plan. "Your wife didn't just break her vows, James," he said, tapping the paper. "She committed bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. This isn't family court anymore. This is a federal offense." Robert brought in a forensic accountant named Elena. For 10 days, while I was supposedly inspecting commercial air conditioning units, I was sitting in a windowless conference room watching Elena trace the money. It didn't take long. Criminals who think they are smart usually leave the dumbest paper trails. Kyle hadn't invested a single dime into a crypto application. There were no developers. There was no code. Instead, Elena pulled the transaction history for Next Trade LLC. Here is what my wife's $180,000 investment actually bought. $24,000 wired to Porsche Financial Services to pay off the lease on his Macan. $15,000 for a 2-week VIP vacation in Tulum, Mexico with his new girlfriend, $42,000 to clear his massive personal credit card debts. The rest was bleeding out in fancy dinners, VIP tables at Scottsdale nightclubs, and luxury designer clothes. He was playing a billionaire playboy using the equity of the home I spent 10 years bleeding for. "I want them both in a cage," I told Robert. "We can't put them there," Robert replied calmly. "But the federal government can. We need to insulate you first." Robert contacted the First Desert Financial Fraud Department on my behalf. Because I had caught the fraudulent loan within the first 60 days, and because I had absolute proof of my whereabouts on the day the e-notary was signed, I was on a recorded dispatch call installing a 5-ton commercial chiller. The bank's internal investigators took over immediately. They quietly froze my personal liability. They agreed not to alert Mia or Kyle while they built their own criminal referral to hand over to the authorities. Meanwhile, I had to sever my financial arteries. Over the next week, I systematically dismantled our shared life. I opened a new business account at a completely different bank and routed all my HVAC company's receivables there. I quietly removed my name from our joint credit cards, leaving only Mia's name attached to her reckless spending. I transferred my entire emergency fund into a protected account under a fresh LLC that Robert set up for me. In the eyes of the law, I was simply preparing for a divorce. In the eyes of reality, I was emptying the castle before I set it on fire. Mia didn't notice a single thing. She was too busy helping her mother plan Kyle's upcoming 30th birthday party. But it wasn't just a birthday party. Kyle had convinced his mother and Mia to rent out the private room at a high-end steakhouse in Scottsdale to serve as the official launch party for Next Trade LLC. He had invited 30 people, friends, our neighbors, even some of my own clients that he was hoping to scam next. "You have to be there, James," Mia told me one night, resting her head on my shoulder while we watched TV. "It would mean so much to Kyle. He really wants to prove to you that he's a real businessman now." I looked at her, feeling absolutely nothing. The empathy had been surgically removed. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said. 3 days before the party, Robert called me. The bank's fraud division had finished their internal investigation. They were officially freezing Next Trade LLC's assets and moving forward with federal charges. Furthermore, Robert had the divorce petition ready, drafted with extreme prejudice, citing the felony fraud as the primary cause. I also had a signed eviction notice. Since the house was premarital property, Mia had 30 days to vacate my property. I picked up the manila folders from Robert's office that Friday afternoon. They were heavy. They felt like justice. Saturday night arrived. I put on my best suit. Mia wore a $400 dress she'd bought with a credit card I was no longer paying for. We drove to the steakhouse together. She held my hand in the car. I let her. I wanted her to feel as safe, secure, and confident as she possibly could. Because the higher you are, the harder you hit the concrete. We pulled up to the valet, handed over the keys, and walked into the private room where her brother was about to give a speech about his fake company built on my stolen money. The private dining room at the steakhouse smelled like expensive cologne and roasted garlic. 30 people were crammed around a massive mahogany table, drinking top-shelf bourbon. At the head of the table stood Kyle, wearing a tailored suit, a smug grin plastered across his face. My mother-in-law, Susan, was looking at him like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. When dessert was served, Kyle clinked his glass with a spoon. The room went quiet. "I want to thank you all for being here," Kyle began, raising his glass. "They say the journey of an entrepreneur is a lonely one. It takes vision, it takes risk, and most importantly, it takes capital. Today, we're not just celebrating my 30th birthday. We are celebrating the launch of Next Trade LLC and the future of decentralized finance." People clapped. Mia cheered loudest of all, beaming with pride. She looked at me, expecting me to clap too. I didn't. I stood up instead. "I'd like to say a few words," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through the applause. The room hushed. Kyle looked surprised, but yielded the floor, probably thinking I was finally going to publicly validate him. "Kyle is right," I said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. "Building a company takes capital, but more importantly, it takes honesty. And I brought a few special gifts to celebrate this milestone." I pulled 2 thick manila envelopes from my jacket. I walked over to Mia first and slid the heavier one in front of her plate. "Babe, what is this?" she asked, laughing nervously. "Open it," I said. She tore the flap. Her eyes scanned the first page. It was the notice of eviction, giving her 30 days to vacate my property. Behind that was the petition for dissolution of marriage. Her face drained of color. "James, what?" "Keep reading, Mia," I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave. "Look at page 3. Page 3 was the criminal referral from First Desert Financial, detailing the forged HELOC signature and the fraudulent IP address used for the e-notary. The fork slipped from Mia's hand and clattered against her porcelain plate. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with sheer terror. She couldn't even form a word. I turned to Kyle and tossed the second envelope onto the table in front of him. "And for the visionary," I said, "a status update on your seed money." Kyle opened it, trying to maintain his smirk, but it vanished instantly. Inside was the forensic accountant's breakdown of his business expenses, the Porsche lease, the Tulum vacation, his credit card debt, and right on top, the official notice from the bank stating that NextTrade LLC's accounts were permanently frozen pending a federal wire fraud investigation. "You see, Kyle," I addressed the dead silent room, "you didn't raise capital. Your sister forged my signature, committed identity theft, and put a $180,000 lien on my paid-off house so you could play pretend CEO for a month." Susan stood up, knocking her chair backward. "James, how dare you ruin my son's night with these lies?" "They aren't lies, Susan," I said, not breaking eye contact with Kyle. "The bank already has the IP logs. The fraud division has the wire transfers." "Oh, and Kyle?" Kyle looked up, his face pale, sweating through his tailored suit. "You might want to look out the window," I said. He scrambled to the blinds. Outside, in the restaurant parking lot, a tow truck was actively hooking up his leased Porsche Macan. Hey, they can't do that," Kyle yelled, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "The bank canceled the wire transfer for your lease payoff," I explained coldly. "Porsche Financial wants their car back, and the FBI will be wanting their money back." I looked down at Mia, who was now openly sobbing, her mascara running down her cheeks. "I'll have the rest of your things boxed up in the garage," I said. "Don't try your key. The locks are already changed." I didn't wait for a response. I turned my back on the chaos, walked out of the restaurant, paid the valet a $20 tip, and drove my old Ford F-150 back to my house, my safe, secure, fully paid-off house. It's been 8 months since that night. The divorce went through faster than I expected, mostly because Mia's lawyer advised her not to fight a man holding federal evidence against her. She moved back into her childhood bedroom at Susan's house. Kyle didn't fare so well. The federal prosecutors didn't care about his vision. He pled guilty to wire fraud to avoid a longer sentence and is currently serving 36 months in a minimum security facility. The bank reversed the HELOC, taking the loss on their end due to the proven fraud. And my home is free and clear once again. A patient man doesn't scream when he's robbed. He just makes sure the thieves build their own prison. If you loved watching this entitled family get exactly what they deserved, comment the word justice down below. Don't forget to hit that like button to feed the algorithm. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We are so close to our first 100 subscribers, and I want you to be part of this community. The next story drops soon, and trust me, it's a wild one. See you then.